What I felt for Noah was devotion, sentiment, and love, some combination of all of them. I couldn't tell anyone, I couldn't even tell myself. But from that day on, my life was entwined with his in ways that were invisible to everyone else. I trace a finger lightly along the curve of his jaw, careful, almost afraid to disturb the fragile peace that has finally settled over him. The warmth of his skin against my hand is a jolt to my soul. I remember every detail of him. The tilt of his head when he laughs, the way his hands move when he's explaining something with fervor, the subtle rise of his eyebrows when he's surprised or delighted. These are memories etched into my mind like carvings, and yet somehow seeing him now, alive and breathing and safe, they feel new again. I remember the first time I realized I couldn't imagine a life without him. I was younger then, fumbling with my emotions and terrified of what they meant. He had been laughing about something, God, I don't even remember what, and the sound pierced me not because it was beautiful but because it made me ache with the knowledge that he existed outside of me. That he could be joyous, free, without me, and yet I was unable to stop wanting him, needing him, or defining myself by the way he moved in the world. I have given him so much, and yet I have taken even more. Years, stolen moments of vulnerability, nights when he slept thinking the world was safe while I silently bore the weight of danger, shame, and secrecy. I manipulated situations, bent rules, twisted reality in ways that made me the keeper of his life. Seeing him here, unburdened by my selfish choices, I realized that even protection has a cost. That even love carried too far, without truth, without balance, becomes a weapon against the person you swear to hold dear. And yet, even knowing all of this, even aware of my failures and my misjudgments, my heart swells with the same unreasoning devotion. I would give everything for him again if I could. I would take the pain back into my own chest, swallow it, and let it scar me instead of him. I would stand in the storm, in the darkness, in the fear if it meant he could live without ever needing to fear me. And still, I know that the greatest gift I can give him now is distance, not absence but space to breathe, to grow, to love in ways I cannot provide. I lean closer, brushing my lips softly against the curve of his temple and whisper into the quiet room, You have always been my world, Noah, you always will be. It is not a plea. It is not a demand. It is a truth, raw and unshielded, and it carries with it every joy, every pain, every longing I have ever known. I think of the nights when he slept beside me, and I couldn't sleep for fear of what I might do, fear of what the intensity of my own feelings might drive me to. I think of the mornings when I woke before him, watching his chest rise and fall, wondering if he even felt the same way, wondering if my devotion had been noticed or merely endured. I think of the years I spent watching him grow, learning, stumbling, thriving, and all I wanted was to be the safe harbor in which he could rest. And all the while, I knew that the heart I had loved for decades might never belong to me in the way I wanted it to. And now, as he sleeps so peacefully beside me, I am overcome by a bitter sweetness. He is here, he is safe, he is whole, and yet he is no longer mine, not truly. Riley holds the present, the future, the warmth of his heart in ways I cannot claim. And still my love is endless, unwavering, impossible to measure, unbreakable even by absence. I have loved him across years of silence and misunderstanding. I have loved him when my own needs threatened to consume him. I have loved him in ways I cannot ever fully express because words are insufficient, because no declaration can contain the weight of a devotion that has spanned decades and defined the very shape of my life. I close my eyes for a moment, pressing my lips gently to the back of his hand, feeling the pulse of his life beneath my fingers. I do not linger. I do not take more than a moment, because love, when it is as deep as this, is not about possession. It is about recognition. It is about bearing witness to the soul you have loved, often unworthy, often blind, but unwavering nonetheless. I have loved him through fear and shame, through desire and desperation. I have loved him through the ache of absence, through the torment of my own failures. I have loved him when it was safest to hide, when it was bravest to stay, and when it was impossible to claim without destroying everything. And in that quiet, I realized something extraordinary. The depth of my love for Noah is not diminished by the fact that he is happy elsewhere. It is not diminished by the knowledge that Riley occupies the present I cannot. It is not diminished by the years lost, the opportunities squandered, the mistakes made. My love is its own thing, a tidal force that cannot be altered, cannot be undone, cannot be contained. It simply is. I am filled with longing and grief, pride and shame, hope and sorrow all at once. I think of what I would give for another decade to do things differently, for another chance to show him the fullness of my heart without breaking him in the process. But I know that chance is gone. What remains is the quiet, undiminished intensity of my feelings, the unending devotion that no one else will ever see or understand. And perhaps in a way that is the purest form of love, not love for recognition, not love for return, not love for reward, but love simply because the heart cannot do otherwise. I watch him sleep a while longer, memorizing the lines of his face, the tilt of his head, the way his eyelashes catch the light. I trace the curve of his jaw with a fingertip, careful, reverent, as if marking the memory of him into my bones. Every detail is sacred. Every breath he takes is a reminder of why I have spent my life trying, failing, and still loving him. And finally, I whisper into the darkened room, "I love you, Noah. I have always loved you. I will always love you." Not as a plea, not as a threat, not as a hope for reciprocation, but as a confession, a truth, and a prayer. Because that is all I can give, that is all I ever could. I watch him now, quiet in the soft glow of the evening light, and it feels as though every breath he takes echoes in my chest. He's unaware of me, of the shadow I've cast over his life for decades, and that's the way it has to be. I can't tell him the extent of what I've carried, what I still carry, because the weight of it would crush him. Even now I tremble at the thought of how much I wanted him, how much I still want him, and how much I've loved him in ways that nobody could ever understand. I close my eyes and let the memories wash over me, the first ones like splinters of sunlight. I was 8, maybe 9, and Noah was already luminous, unknowing of the gravity he would hold in my life. I remember the first time I truly noticed him, not just saw him but felt him. He was laughing at something ridiculous, a small toy that refused to work properly, and I thought my chest might burst. There was a spark inside me, a recognition, as though my body knew before my mind did, that he mattered more than anything else in the world. I followed him everywhere, pretending it was a coincidence. I offered my hand when he stumbled, shared my lunch when he forgot his, and laughed at his jokes before he could even expect anyone to notice. That was my first act of devotion, to make him feel safe. Without realizing it, Noah had made me safe, even in the smallest ways, because I already knew that the world could be cruel and he couldn't yet defend himself. I remember the first time I realized I wanted more than companionship. It wasn't the day he smiled at me or the day he held my hand, it was when he cried after someone had been cruel to him. I wanted to take the hurt into myself, to absorb it so he wouldn't have to feel it. My chest ached, my stomach twisted, and for a brief, dizzying moment I understood that this ache had no name. It was devotion, obsession, love, some combination of all of them. I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't even tell myself, but from that day on, my life was entwined with his in ways that were invisible to everyone else. Remember when Noah was little, maybe 5 or 6, and he would play with his little trains? Well, they were my trains, but I let him have them. What was mine was his, after all. Sometimes one of my uncles or aunts would pick him up or boop him on the nose, and Noah would either start crying, screaming, or giggling. Sometimes my father would pick him up and his little gangly legs would dangle beneath him. I would start screaming, and Joey would immediately take Noah out of my father's hands and give him back to me. No one touched Noah without me. Little Noah was mine, his blonde. Spiky hair looked like a little mushroom perched on top of his head, above those small hands, little legs, and endless giggles that belonged entirely to Noah. When other kids tried to push him around, I reacted immediately. I would remove Noah from the scene, scooping him up while he was still giggling and carrying him somewhere safe. Bullies seemed to like pushing or intimidating Noah, but I always stepped in before they could get too far. I would hiss at them, stare them down, and keep myself between them and Noah until they finally retreated. Nobody was going to hurt my little buddy while I was there. One thing I noticed most about Noah was his giggle. Sometimes when we were little, I would tug gently on his little legs just to get his attention, or I would lick them, which would make Noah squeal and immediately pull his leg away, covering it protectively with his little hands. Then Joey would come into the room and start talking about a dragon that ate little kids, especially delicious little kids. He would lick his lips dramatically, and Noah would burst into giggles before scrambling over to sit in my lap so the dragon couldn't get him. I loved watching him laugh like that. For a little while, the world was nothing more than Noah's giggles, Joey's ridiculous dragon, and the two of us keeping him safe from imaginary monsters. Joey would pick little Noah up by the hips and settle him onto his lap, bouncing his little nephew gently on his knee. Noah wasn't Joey's blood nephew, but Joey treated him as though he were his second nephew anyway. "You're a delicious little boy," Joey said in a deep, exaggerated dragon's voice. "I think we'll start with your little leg." He lifted Noah's leg and made a dramatic growling sound. Noah dissolved into giggles, squirming and trying to pull his leg away from the dragon. "Delicious," Joey growled again, pretending to inspect him. "Now what shall I do with this delicious little boy? Tickle him, eat him, or make him say uncle?" Noah only giggled harder, trying desperately to escape the imaginary dragon while Joey held him securely on his lap. Whenever Noah was scared, he would climb onto Tate's lap and bury his blue eyes against Tate's chest, especially whenever a teacher was angry or their kindergarten instructor raised her voice. Noah spent what seemed like almost his entire childhood sitting on Tate's lap. They would watch movies cheek to cheek, their legs tangled together as they sat side by side. Sometimes Tate would feed Noah popcorn, turning it into a little game. He would hold a piece close to Noah's mouth, wait for Noah to lean forward to bite it, and then pull it away at the last second. Noah would laugh and reach for it, and Tate would do it again, teasing him until they were both laughing too hard to keep watching the movie. Adolescence brought its own terrors. I remember watching him talk to other boys, my chest tightening with a jealousy I didn't know how to name. I remember the first time he trusted someone else, and I felt a hollow ache inside me as though a piece of myself had been carved away. I convinced myself it was about protection, that if I didn't make him mine in every sense I could, the world would take him before I could. I began to repress my feelings, to lie to myself, to make my presence a shadow of support rather than a confession of desire. But every time he laughed, every time he reached for me for comfort, every time he succeeded at something brilliant or survived something dangerous, my devotion only deepened. I recall my first heartbreak, the first time I realized that love could be cruel even when you tried to protect it. He had a crush on someone else, innocent, fleeting, and yet it felt like betrayal to me. I held him close that night, stroking his hair as he cried about an imaginary girl who didn't care for him the way he deserved. I didn't tell Noah I loved him until tonight. I also didn't tell him I wanted him more than anything else until I started fighting for us publicly. I just stood there, letting him pour out his heart and taking my own heartbreak into my chest. That night, I learned devotion could hurt more than any injury ever could. College brought a new level of complexity. I remember the nights I stayed up waiting for him to come back from parties, wondering if he was safe, if he was happy, if he even thought of me. I watched him grow into a man, beautiful, brilliant, unbroken, and I realized the depths of my failure. I wanted to claim him, to tell him that he had been mine to love for 22 years and that I had squandered every opportunity, but I didn't. I stayed silent, a ghost in his life, and let him find stability, happiness, even love in ways that didn't involve me. I gave him what I could without breaking him further, and it was never enough. There were moments when my devotion turned into obsession. I followed him not physically but in every sense that mattered. I listened to his laughter on the phone, memorized the inflection in his voice, and knew when he was upset before he admitted it. I protected him from things he never knew existed. I manipulated dangerous situations so that he could be safe, happy, and whole, and all the while I hated myself for doing it. I hated that my love was controlling, that my desire to keep him unbroken had made me a threat to his autonomy. I was proud and ashamed in the same heartbeat, and that duality has haunted me for decades. I grew up without agency, control, or choice in my own home. Sweet Noah told me to set boundaries and expect more from others. Without Noah in my life, I have no idea if I would be alive or in a healthy place. I've been going to therapy since I married Chloe. Those sessions showed me the importance of letting go of the control I want to exert with Noah. It's normal to want to protect someone I care for, but not if it smothers them. My BPD required Noah to lie next to me in bed at night, regardless of our ages or marital status. I put too much pressure on the blonde, and when I didn't confirm my feelings publicly, Noah felt used and replaceable. I kept my feelings hidden because my affluent environment repelled homosexual attraction and affection. I'm not a personal, sexual, or romantic person unless there are deep sentimental feelings already established between my partner and me. My therapist said I'm demisexual, and I agree with her. Everyone I know probably thinks I'm a hypersexual person, but it's a response to the hate crime I survived when I was 15. Sex was used against me as a weapon, especially because I was queer. After that, it became the only way I knew how to reclaim my body and regain a sense of bodily autonomy. My basher had used sex as a fear tactic, to humiliate me and make me terrified of queer vulnerability and sexuality. So I became hypersexual in an attempt to change the way I felt about sex. I needed to turn something that had once been used to frighten and control me into something I could control, benefit from, and even use for comfort. It helped me regulate my fear and my aversion to male-on-male physical intimacy. I could engage in sexual relationships with women instead, and as a bisexual man I was genuinely attracted to them. But I still needed some kind of emotional connection in order to feel satisfied by sex, even though I could engage in it mechanically without one. In some ways, I was trying to take back something that had been used against me and make it mine again. I slept with many women, but I had no real connection to them, no vulnerability, no sentiment. It was almost entirely mechanical. I treated the women well, or at least as well as I knew how to at the time. I never led them on, and I never promised them anything. The nicest thing I did was make sure I used protection so they couldn't become pregnant. I never took anything from them, and practically all of them seemed to want to use me or my money. So leaving them behind was probably the nicest thing I've ever done. They weren't going to get anything more from me. I didn't want sentiment with them. It was impossible to be vulnerable with someone who didn't really know who I was. My secrets were buried too deeply beneath the surface. Only one person had ever shared my bed while knowing the truth about everything. And that was a mistake. It wasn't fair or right to sleep with Noah when he was in the dark and didn't know what I knew, but I didn't have the heart to tell him the truth. The truth would have traumatized the blonde. It was one of those secrets that, once you knew it, you never really slept with your eyes closed again. Sex itself could be pleasurable, but I was never truly satisfied. My mother could probably figure that out, considering I'd been with 10,000 women. It had become a hobby, something to fill the time. It wasn't anything serious. I just hoped Noah had never been hurt by it, because when he wasn't there, I had to find something to fill the empty time. I remember every moment I spent with Noah, especially the time after school let out. I think of the afternoons when he would sit with me, trusting me without question, and the nights when he cried in my arms over things I could never fix. I remember the time he fell in love with someone else, and I had to hide the ache in my chest while offering him comfort and advice. I remember being furious at him for trusting another, and yet loving him for that very capacity to hope and desire. I remember every small kiss, every brush of hands, every laugh, every tear. I cataloged them in my mind, knowing that I could never tell him how much each moment had cost me, how much each had filled me with longing. I remember the day I realized he was gay. I had been terrified, believing that revelation would destroy me, that the world would crush him, that he would never survive. And yet he was brave. He was himself. And in that bravery I saw every reason I had loved him, every reason I had spent years bending my life around his safety. I wanted to protect him from everything, even from the truth of my own feelings, but I knew then that he was capable of surviving the world, of carving his own happiness. That realization didn't lessen my obsession, it sharpened it. I wanted him whole, yes, but I also wanted him to want me, to see me, to love me in a way I had never allowed. There were days when my devotion became unbearable. I remember the afternoons when I would watch him talk to friends, smile at strangers, navigate the world without me, and I felt a sharp, stabbing pain. I hated Riley before I ever met him. I mildly disliked anyone who could give him something I could not. And yet when I finally was told by Talia that Noah was with Riley, alive and glowing in that love, I realized that my devotion had never been about possession. It had been about preservation. I wanted him to be happy, safe, unbroken, even if that meant my heart shattered in ways I could never fully articulate. There were nights when I would lie awake thinking about the choices I had made. The lies, the omissions, the self-inflicted distance. I could see the moments where I had failed him, where my fear had poisoned what could have been tenderness, where my need for control had overshadowed my love. And yet I also remembered every moment I had held him, protected him, made him feel safe, even when I had no idea if I was doing the right thing. Every time I had bent over backward to absorb pain meant for him, every time I had silenced my own heart so he could thrive, every time I had given him everything I had without asking for anything in return, that had been my devotion, and I would carry it forever. I remember specific moments that cut me to the bone. The first time he cried because I wasn't there to save him. The first time I realized he might love someone else. The first time he smiled at someone and I wanted to vanish from existence. I remember the subtle touches that told me he trusted me, that he needed me, that he would allow me to hold his soul for a moment before letting it go. I cataloged those moments, each one a jewel and a shard of glass simultaneously. I think of the last time I truly saw him before Riley became his present, which caused the ache of watching him step into someone else's arms, the sharp knowledge that my devotion had limits, and the realization that his happiness might never include me fully. And yet, even in that heartbreak, I understood the depth of what I felt. I loved him for everything he was, everything he would become, and even the things I had forced him to endure because of my own fear. That love was not selfish. It was not clean, it was not simple, but it was eternal. Even now, as he sleeps, as Riley waits somewhere else to share his heart and future with him, I am flooded by the same longing, the same intensity, the same unquenchable desire to protect, cherish, and love him with everything I have. I want to take him in my arms, tell him every truth I have buried, every confession I have silenced, every yearning I have hidden. I want him to know that my love has always been unwavering, that it has been patient, that it has been impossible to extinguish. And yet, I cannot, because some truths are too heavy to bear, and some love is too vast to survive in the light of day. I close my eyes and press my lips to the back of his hand, a fleeting, reverent gesture that encapsulates decades of longing. I think of every scraped knee I kissed, every tear I wiped away, every sleepless night I spent keeping him safe. I think of every moment I held my tongue, every lie I allowed to protect him, every sacrifice I made so that he could breathe, laugh, and live freely. I have loved him for 20 years with a ferocity that would frighten anyone, a devotion that has left scars on both of us. And still, I love him. When I saved Noah's life, I didn't feel like a hero but a man who had invited a boy into a nightmare and corrected the mess I created. I'm the reason Noah almost died. My offering myself as a substitute wasn't heroic. It fixed something I broke. If I had stayed away from him when we were 4, he would be happier, safer, and would have a family by now. I robbed Noah of the life and loves he could have lived and met. Noah has grown into a man beyond my reach, brilliant, generous, warm, and alive. Riley is everything I could never be, and yet my heart aches not with jealousy but with a beautiful, terrible grief. I love Noah not because he is mine but because he exists. I love him not because he should love me back but because he has always been worth the devotion I've carried. I love him with the intensity of a lifetime, with the knowledge of every misstep and every triumph, with the intimacy of 1,000 memories that no one else knows. I will love him like this until the end of my days, quietly, fiercely, unyieldingly. I will love him even if that love cannot be returned, even if it can only exist in the shadows of my heart. It is the purest, most impossible, most devastating love I have ever known, and in that love I find both my torment and my salvation. Because to love Noah is to live in a world of brilliance and heartbreak, to exist simultaneously in the ache of what was lost and the wonder of what he is. And I would not trade a single second of it, not even the years spent in silence, obsession, and fear. Because loving him has made me who I am, and even if he never chooses me, I have chosen him every day since we met. I remember the first time I saw him clearly, as if the world had shifted and he alone was in focus. He was 8, maybe 9, small and bright-eyed, full of life that had nothing to do with me, but somehow I already felt tethered. I can still see him laughing over some childish frustration, his hands flailing in the air like a conductor of invisible music. That laugh, the sound of it, struck my chest and rooted me in a way I could never have explained at the time. I wanted to be near him, to hold him steady against a world that had no idea how cruel it could be. I was obsessed even then, though I didn't know the word. I just knew I wanted him safe, wanted him to feel seen, wanted him to know that no matter what, someone cared with an intensity he could not yet comprehend. I followed him everywhere, a shadow with a heartbeat. I carried snacks for him in my pockets, picked up his books when he dropped them, and laughed at the things he found funny before anyone else did. I gave him my attention, my devotion in ways that were invisible to everyone else. I didn't understand love then, not fully, but I understood a hunger to protect him, to be near him, to exist in the same space as him. My small gestures were my first declarations, and he never knew. I owed a debt of gratitude to Noah because he saved me every day, but the blonde never knew. He could do no wrong, and I was the lucky one he chose to acknowledge us. Heartbreak began early, when I realized that the world would touch him in ways I could not control. I remember him crying over a small betrayal, a boy who had been cruel, a teacher who had been careless, and my own chest splitting with the urge to absorb his pain. I kissed his tears away in secret, whispered that he would be safe, and hid my own quivering hands. I wanted him to know I was there always, but I could not tell him why. I was too young, too foolish, too terrified. I was learning that love and pain could coexist, that devotion could hurt as much as it could heal. Every teacher or bully who targeted Noah intentionally, I fixed the situation. In my young adult years, the suppression became deliberate. I told myself it was for him, that if I revealed the intensity of my feelings, I would frighten him, damage him, or make him recoil. I constructed a careful architecture of friendship, of silent care. Protection that was invisible yet absolute. I arranged my life around him, anticipated his needs before he could speak them, absorbed his troubles into my own chest so he could walk through the world without the weight of them. I remember late nights waiting outside his dorm windows to make sure he was safe, calling just to hear his voice, making small excuses to be nearby. I loved him in ways that were quiet, patient, and all-consuming. But I also hated myself for loving him this way and doing nothing about the desires I couldn't contain. And then the adult years came, with reflection and obsession intertwined. I saw him flourish without me, carving his path, claiming spaces I could not touch. I watched him smile at others, laugh with others, succeed in ways I had dreamed for him, and a part of me wanted to vanish in the shadow of my own inadequacy. And yet I stayed because staying meant I could protect him, even from the consequences of my absence. I was obsessed with keeping him whole, even if that meant sacrificing pieces of myself. I orchestrated situations from afar, ensuring he had support, safety, guidance, even when he didn't know it came from me. I loved him in silence, in absence, in devotion without acknowledgement. Critical moments flash in my mind like lightning. The first time he realized he was gay, how careful I had to be, how terrified I was that this knowledge would somehow shatter him. I kept my distance while simultaneously ensuring he could navigate it safely. The first time he fell in love with someone else, I had to swallow a rage that would have consumed me and offer him comfort, as though my heart wasn't breaking. Every time he trusted another, every time he smiled at someone else, I felt a stabbing pain and a rush of pride, because his joy, even when it didn't include me, mattered more than my desire. I remember nights of heartbreak I can barely speak of, times when he cried over small cruelties, times when he was left uncertain and I had to pretend the world was not falling apart around him. I remember the first time he looked at someone, and I wished I could disappear just to let him live freely, to let him thrive without my suffocating presence. I remember my failures vividly, how I abandoned him when fear dictated, how I repressed my emotions, how I lied to myself and to him. And yet, I remember my devotion just as clearly. I remember the nights I held him, whispered reassurances, and bore the weight of the world for him. I remember the sacrifices I made to keep him safe, to keep him happy, to keep him whole. I never told Noah about the 2 hate crimes I suffered on his behalf because I knew what kind of toll the truth would take on him. Noah would blame himself, he would feel ashamed, he would hate knowing that I had been hurt because of him. He would never forgive himself for being the reason I experienced lifelong trauma. So I took the truth, hid it, and carried it alone because I believed it was better if only one of us had to carry it. Noah was sensitive, knowing the truth could have ruined his life, and more than anything, I didn't want him to feel as though he owed me something. I would have spent the rest of my life wondering whether he stayed because he felt indebted to me, because he believed he had to repay me for everything I had endured on his behalf. I never wanted Noah to love me because of what I had suffered for him. I wanted him to stay because he loved me, because he wanted me, because in whatever way he was capable of loving me, he genuinely wanted to give that love back. That was the only reason I could ever accept. The truth was that Noah, eventually finding out what had happened to me, was planned to be targeted at him before I intervened. The violence itself wasn't the worst part. The worst part was who had done it, and honestly, Andrew was an idiot. Fortunately, his stupidity worked in my favor. He was dumb enough to believe almost anything I told him at the warehouse. One afternoon in our freshman year at Brown, while Noah was out spending time with his friends, I received an envelope in the mail. My basher, a former lover of mine, had sent me documentation about one of Noah's friends. Andrew, as it turned out, wasn't even using his real surname. The name listed for him in the directory wasn't his own. He had changed his name 4 times because of blackmail, and ironically, he had been living under almost the same kind of circumstances for nearly 10 years. I knew everything about Andrew because of that envelope. I knew he wasn't lying. He simply wasn't comfortable talking about his past, and that was his business. I had no intention of forcing him to explain himself. I had always researched everyone who came around Noah. Every single one of his friends had been investigated by a private investigator. I wanted to know that they were decent people before I allowed them to get too close to him. Noah was an extension of me, at least socially. Anyone who could get close to him could potentially use him to get to me. I didn't want any snakes slithering around Noah. He'd had a few in high school, and there had been several adults who saw the naivety of a boy born in a trailer as an opportunity to profit from him. I wasn't going to let that happen if I could stop it. Anyone who approached Noah, adults or young people who wanted to become friendly with him, immediately caught my attention. I watched everyone who came into Noah's life because I knew how easily someone could disguise bad intentions behind a friendly smile, a kind word, or an offer of friendship. Noah was naturally trusting. He had a softness about him that made people want to be around him, and unfortunately that same softness could make him vulnerable to people who saw his kindness as something they could exploit. I knew that if someone wanted to get close to Noah, I needed to know why. Was it because they genuinely liked him? Was it because they cared about him? Or was there something else underneath it? I didn't care whether they were adults or young people. If I knew they had ill intent, I would ask my Uncle Joey to put the fear of God in them. I wasn't interested in waiting until someone hurt Noah before doing something about it. I wanted people to understand from the beginning that Noah wasn't someone they could manipulate, use, intimidate, or take advantage of simply because he was trusting. Joey usually didn't need to do much. Sometimes he would show them pictures of what he had done to Lina's face that time on my 19th birthday. That alone was usually enough to make the message very clear. Anyone who didn't have good intentions would scurry away with their tail between their legs. Joey had been in the military, and he could take down a full-grown man with just one punch. Nobody stayed around if Joey glared at them. There was something about that look of his that made even the most confident person suddenly reconsider whatever they had planned. Joey had always threatened that anyone who touched his nephews or tried to manipulate them and gain something from them would regret it. He would bring his shovel down on their throat and drag them near the rose bushes. It was an outrageous threat, but coming from Joey, people tended to believe him. All it took was one glare from Uncle Joey, and the most seasoned blackmailer, scummy criminal, or manipulative social climber would suddenly decide that Noah wasn't worth the trouble. That was the thing about Joey. He didn't need to explain himself. He didn't need to raise his voice or make a grand speech. He could stand there silently, look at someone for a few seconds, and somehow make them understand that whatever game they were playing, they had chosen the wrong person to play it with. And if they were approaching Noah with bad intentions, I made damn sure they knew it. I didn't even usually have to tell Uncle Joey that someone near Noah was in trouble. He could smell it. He seemed to have some sixth sense for people who were trying to manipulate Noah. The moment someone's intentions felt wrong, Joey would appear behind them, almost out of nowhere, and hiss at them in that low, threatening voice of his. Everyone knew who Joey was. He had gotten a Purple Heart when he was younger and a medal for being an expert sniper. There was a reputation that followed him, and people who knew anything about him generally knew better than to test it. Nobody messed with Joey. I remembered when I had beaten Derek up and thrown him through the window. It wasn't even the first time I had seen somebody go through a window in my house. Uncle Joey had thrown guys out the window before for being unprofessional and for getting designs on people Joey considered loved ones. That was the line with Joey, his nephews Tate and Noah. If Joey considered you his nephews, he protected you. There was no negotiation, no discussion. And no second chance once someone crossed that line. The only thing Joey loved more than me was that blonde little boy. Noah. Joey watched Noah like a hawk. That was why Noah was always on his knee, sitting in his lap or somewhere close enough that Joey could reach out and grab him if he needed to. Noah could be laughing, playing, watching television, or simply wandering around the room, and Joey always seemed to know exactly where he was. It was almost funny sometimes. Noah could be surrounded by an entire room full of people, but somehow Joey's attention always found him. And if somebody with bad intentions came near that blonde little boy, Joey's glare could make a person reconsider every decision that had brought them into the room. Looks could kill. Uncle Joey's glare could certainly ward off bad men. I protected Noah my entire life from bullies, from seedy people, from anyone I thought might hurt him. I never wanted to control his life. Noah could choose whatever life he wanted, and I would never stop him. I only ever wanted him to be safe enough to make those choices for himself. I just wish he loved me back the way I loved him. And now, in the present, as I watch him live fully with Riley, I am consumed by a storm of emotion that is impossible to untangle. I am proud of him, proud of the life he has built, proud of the love he is experiencing. I am also devastated because I am not the recipient of that love. And yet, even in this grief, I feel the same devotion I felt as a boy, as a teenager, as a young adult. I would do anything for him, endure anything for him, love him endlessly, even if that love is never returned in kind. I have loved him in silence, in shadow, in secrecy, and that love has shaped every choice, every path, every scar I bear. I can see every detail, every memory of him etched into my soul. I can see him laughing under the sun, hear his voice calling across a room, feel the warmth of his hand brushing against mine. I can remember the smell of his hair after a bath, the sound of his breathing when he slept beside me, the quiver of his lips when he was upset. These are not fleeting images, they are permanent, as vital to me as my own heartbeat. My love has been relentless, unyielding, unashamed, even when I tried to hide it from the world and from myself. And in these quiet moments of reflection, I reach an understanding. My devotion is not diminished because he loves someone else. My attachment does not fade because his heart belongs to another. I can exist in his life, even from a distance, and honor the years I have loved him, the sacrifices I have made, the protection I have provided. Love does not demand possession, does not require reciprocation, it simply exists. And my love for Noah exists beyond time, beyond circumstances, and beyond the pain and mistakes of the past. I trace the curve of his jaw in my mind, press my lips softly to an imagined hand, and whisper words I cannot speak aloud. I have loved you for 20 years. I have lived in your shadow, in your joy, in your pain. I have given everything and asked nothing. I have waited, hoped, and survived, and I will love you until my last breath. There is grief here, yes, terrible, consuming grief, but also beauty. I have loved wholly, without reservation, without compromise. I have known him as he is, as he was, and as he might never be with me. I have loved him through the ache of absence, the torment of my own failures, the impossibility of desire, and still my heart beats for him. Still I ache for him. Still I hold him in the most sacred place I have, my memory, my soul, my devotion. And though he may never know the depth of my feelings, the extent of my sacrifices, the moments I bent the world for him, I am content in this, that my love has been true, absolute, and unwavering. I have lived for him, breathed for him, existed for him, and I will continue to do so. This is the legacy of 24 years of devotion, heartbreak, sentiment, and unspoken love. This is what it means to love Noah. I woke up with a start, my heart pounding in my chest, my body still tingling from the remnants of the dream. I reached out my hand, finding only cool sheets. I blinked, the dim light of the room slowly coming into focus. Noah was gone, again. Noah not being in this bed infuriated me, not because I believed I had any right to expect him to stay, and not because I thought I deserved it. I just wanted him to want to stay. I wanted to wake up every morning and find Noah still beside me, knowing that he had chosen to remain there until I opened my eyes. But for the past 10 years, Noah had developed this habit of wandering away sometime before 6 in the morning. Sometimes he would go to the gym, sometimes he would make breakfast, other times he would simply disappear. I never knew exactly where he was going or why he felt the need to leave before I woke up, and I always wondered if he did it just to piss me off. I sat up, running a hand through my hair, the dream still vivid in my mind. Noah straddling me, his hands on either side of my head, his lips on mine. It had been soft, gentle, not like the intense, almost desperate kisses we'd shared the night before. This one had been different, meaningful. I wanted more of that, more of him, not just his body, not just the peace he brought to my life. I wanted his thoughts, his dreams, and his fears. I wanted to know what made him laugh, what made him cry. I wanted to know if he dreamt of me too, the way I dreamed of him. Suppose he thought about me when I wasn't there, if he ever lay awake at night wishing I were next to him, but he wasn't here. I looked down and found an uncomfortable morning surprise stirring in my lap. I had a raging boner, quite painful and uncomfortable, and I would take care of it, but the object of my affection was gone. I needed the blonde where he should be in this bed, which was why I scowled, leaving the bed by myself. I was already in an ill humor to not wake up next to him, but maybe he was making breakfast. I sighed, throwing off the covers and standing up on cold wooden panels. I grabbed a pair of sweatpants from the dresser and pulled them on, not bothering with a shirt. I padded downstairs, the house quiet and still. It was early, the sun just beginning to creep over the horizon, casting long shadows across the floor. The kitchen was empty, the coffee maker untouched. I started a pot, the familiar smell filling the room as I waited for it to brew. I poured myself a mug black and took it out onto the porch. The air was cool, the dew still wet on the grass. I sat on the top step, wrapping my hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into my skin. I thought about last night, about the sex. It is intense and passionate. About the words I'd whispered in his ear, the questions I'd asked, the way he'd responded, his body arching into mine, his voice ragged with pleasure and emotion. I thought about the way he'd looked at me, his eyes soft and warm, his face flushed with desire and something else, something deeper. And then I thought about this morning, about waking up alone, again. Noah had made coffee, his former companion had always, the whole time he knew him, thought of other people's comfort first. Tate admired Noah's selflessness and devotion, which was why he loved Noah. I took a sip of the coffee, the bitter taste grounding me. I knew Noah had his own room now. I knew he was trying to assert his independence, to find his own space. I respected that, I did, but I also missed him. Missed him in this bed, missed him in the kitchen, missed him in the quiet moments between sleep and dawn. I wanted to talk to him about the dream, about last night, about everything, but he wasn't here, and I didn't know where he was or when he'd be back. I sighed, setting the mug down on the step beside me. I leaned back, looking up at the sky, the sun now a bright orange blob on the horizon. I thought about calling him, but I didn't want to wake him if he was still sleeping. I thought about texting, but that felt too impersonal. I wanted him here with me. I sat there, the coffee growing cold in the mug beside me, the sun climbing higher in the sky. I waited, for Noah, for answers, for something, anything. And as the day wore on, I realized that this was what my life had become. A series of waiting rooms, a string of empty beds, a long, endless game of hopping for crumbs, for scraps, for any sign that Noah felt the same way, that he wanted the same things, that he was in this, whatever this was, as deeply as I was. But he wasn't here, and I didn't know when or if he would be, and that more than anything was what scared me, what made my heart ache, my stomach churn, my dreams twist into something dark and uncertain. Because I loved him more than anything, and I was terrified that one day he wouldn't be there to love back. The thought hollowed me out in a way I hadn't prepared for. I kept circling the same questions like a bruise I couldn't stop pressing. Had Riley become more important than me? Had I finally been replaced in the only place that ever mattered? Talia's words echoed with a calm finality that terrified me. Noah was in love, not infatuated, not clinging to fantasies, in love. What I wanted from Noah had never been simple, and it had never been fair. I didn't just need his body. I needed him to look at me the way he used to when we were young, before fear and damage and silence crowded in. I needed him to say that what passed between us wasn't a misunderstanding or a phase or a trauma bond, but something real that lived in the marrow. I needed him to want what lived inside my soul, not the protection I offered, not the space I took up in his life, not the history we shared like a scar. But love doesn't work like that. It doesn't exist to soothe my terror of being forgotten. And Noah had grown in ways I had both wanted for him and resented with an ugly, aching jealousy. Riley offered him something I probably couldn't maintain: consistency without control, warmth without fear, desire without aftermath. Riley didn't need to be needed, he simply was. That was the truth I kept avoiding. Noah had needed me once, needed my presence, my vigilance, my intensity, and I had mistaken that need for love because it made me indispensable. But now he didn't need me to survive. He chose someone else to live with. I wanted him to admit he still felt me in his bones, the way I felt him. I wanted him to say I mattered in a way that hadn't expired, yet some part of me, quiet, bruised, but finally honest, knew that asking him for that confession would be another kind of theft. It would pull him backward into a gravity he had fought for years to escape. If Noah loved me now, it wasn't the way I loved him. It was softer, distant, boundaries. And if he loved Riley, truly loved him, then my role was no longer to haunt the edges of his happiness, demanding proof that I still existed. Loving Noah had always meant protecting him, even from myself. And if that meant letting go of the last illusion that I was still the center of his emotional universe, then that was the cost of loving him honestly for the first time. Exactly, that's the core of it, the truth I could never admit aloud but couldn't escape. Noah shouldn't love me because of the weight I carried into his life, the sacrifices, the fear, the obsession, the years I'd stolen with my hang-ups and my fragile, fractured heart. He shouldn't love me out of pity, duty, nostalgia, or the invisible debt he imagined he owed me for surviving my chaos. Those things weren't love. They were shadowed reflections of what we could have had, echoes of a bond twisted by circumstance, obsession, and my own self-destruction. No, Noah's love, if it were ever to exist, had to be pure. It had to burn as it belonged to him, unprompted, unconditioned, and untainted. It had to be something I couldn't earn by history or suffering. He had to want to reach for me, not because I was familiar, not because he had survived me, not because he remembered the old days of scraped knees and whispered secrets. His heart had to pin itself to mine, willingly, irresistibly, because it wanted me, because he chose me in the quiet, private chambers of his desire, the same way I had always chosen him. Anything less would break me in ways I couldn't bear. Anything less would turn love into a ledger, a tally of who had given what, who had suffered more, who had survived. That was never what I wanted. What I craved and feared I might never receive was a love that existed for its own sake, unbound by guilt, not shadowed by memory, unburdened by history. And the terrifying, aching truth was this: after 20 years of devotion, obsession, and restraint, I might never get that, not with Noah, not ever, because I had made sure he had another life, one where my chaos could not touch him, one where he could be free. And if that meant he could never pin his heart to mine, not out of duty, not out of fear, not out of shared scars, but only because he wanted to, only because he loved me as I truly am, then maybe my greatest act of love was letting him live without me, even as I burned for him every single day. I could survive the absence of his love, but the desire for it, the raw, unyielding, pure desire, was something I carried like fire in my chest. And it was a fire that would never extinguish because Noah had been the sun in my world before I even knew what sunlight was. I love him because out of every soul and heart on this dreary planet, I allowed his heart to touch mine. A blonde-haired, sweet innocent boy open in a way the world eventually punishes was the one person I never built walls against. I didn't armor myself with distance or irony or cruelty when it came to him. I let him in before I even understood what that meant, before fear, before shame, before I knew how dangerous it was to be seen. He touched my heart when it was still soft, when it hadn't yet learned how to survive by hardening. And once that happens, once a heart is touched that early, that purely, there is no undoing it. Every love after that is compared, consciously or not. Every warmth feels like an echo. Every safety feels like a translation of something first spoken in his language. I didn't love him because he needed me. I didn't love him because of what I gave or what I endured or what I sacrificed. I loved him because when he looked at me I felt human, not powerful, not needed, not feared, just human. And that was rarer than passion, rarer than desire, rarer even than loyalty. He didn't ask to be the axis of my world. He didn't know what he awakened in me, the protectiveness that bordered on obsession, the devotion that frightened me with its depth, the need to keep him untouched by the worst parts of life, even if that meant letting those parts destroy me instead. I chose that, over and over again, quietly, without witnesses. And loving him was never about possession. God, no, it was about reverence, about standing in the presence of something good and deciding not to contaminate it with my damage. It was about watching him grow, watching him laugh, watching him love others, and knowing that the most sacred thing I could do was not interfere. All my friends and my family believed that I was the one with all the power in my relationship with Noah. They thought Noah was simply the little puppy who followed me around, that I determined what our relationship was, how it progressed, and when it stopped. But in actual reality, the exact opposite was true. I never controlled our relationship, neither did Noah. There were things about the beginning of us that I could never explain to anyone, not even Noah. I could never tell him why we met in preschool or why I brought him home. When Andrew was in his car at the warehouse, I lied. I couldn't tell Andrew the truth either, even 3 years after it happened. And even though Andrew had only found out a few days ago, I still couldn't talk about it. When you know a secret that is so terrible, you understand that the moment before you tell it and every moment after would become two completely separate periods of your life. There are words you don't speak because once they're spoken, you can't take them back. They don't simply hurt the people you love, they shatter the life they've built around themselves. If Noah ever found out the truth, the life he had now would be over. And I never wanted to find out what would be left of Noah afterward. I didn't know who he would become when everything he believed about his life, about me, and about us was taken away from him. I only knew that I loved him enough to keep the secret, and terrified enough to know that telling him might destroy him. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't confess it. And most of all, I could never tell Noah. Some secrets were too deeply buried to survive being spoken aloud. That's why it hurts the way it does, because this wasn't a love built on illusion or fantasy or chemistry alone. It was built on recognition. At that moment, two hearts touched and one of them never recovered, not because it was broken but because it had found its truth too early. I hadn't a clue my feelings for Noah had been romantic. I was too obsessed with our friendship for love to be a primary issue. I told myself stories to survive. I told myself that proximity meant protection, that vigilance meant love, that if Noah was close to me nothing bad could happen to him. I told myself his presence anchored me, regulated me, kept the past from repeating itself, and some of that was true in ways that still scare me. But the part I can't hide behind anymore is this: safety built on fear is not safety at all. Noah deserved better than a straight friend who repressed their feelings for dark reasons. I had told the twat how I felt, but he hadn't said a word last night or early this morning. There was a time when my body only slept if Noah's heart felt close to mine, not his body, not his touch, not anything physical. It was his being, the steady way he existed. The quiet certainty that he was alive, breathing, unbroken, that his goodness hadn't been taken yet, that was what calmed me. And that's where the line blurred. Because I confused regulation with protection. I confused need with care. I confused my terror of another Wayne with love. Noah didn't exist to keep my nightmares away. He didn't owe me proximity so I could breathe. Even if my intentions were wrapped in devotion, even if my fear was real, even if my love was deep, none of that made it fair to pull him into a space that wasn't truly safe. The hardest truth is this: I didn't need Noah's body to prevent disaster. I needed help. I needed boundaries. I needed to confront the violence already living inside my life instead of building my sense of peace around another human being. And yet, this is also true, and it can coexist without contradiction. What I loved was never ownership. What I loved was never being in control. What I loved was the moment his heart touched mine and I felt human instead of haunted. That doesn't absolve me, but it explains to me. I can grieve the fact that my love was real and accept that my actions crossed lines that love should never cross. I can mourn the version of myself that didn't know how to protect without clinging, how to care without consuming. And if Noah is safe now, truly safe in a life that doesn't orbit my fear, then loving him means letting that be enough, even if it costs me everything I thought love was supposed to give. I have loved him for 20 years, and I have done everything in my power to make him safe, to make him whole, to make him feel like the world was never going to crush him. I have sacrificed myself in ways I will never speak aloud. I have held him in the dark and breathed the terror from his lungs without asking for anything in return. And yet, even as I did it, I always knew that none of that was enough, because loving him is not about what I can give or endure. Loving him has never been about me. Loving him is about him, about his heart, about the choice he makes, about the pure, unbroken desire that can exist only if he wants me and not my history, not my scars, not the shadow of my mistakes. I think about all the moments I have loved him, those flashes of childhood fascination, adolescent jealousy, adult obsession, and I see them now fully and painfully as a mosaic of my devotion. I see the way I have manipulated situations to keep him safe, to keep him happy, to make him feel like the world could not harm him while I breathed. I see the way I have lied to myself, told myself I was doing this for him when in truth it was also for me. I needed to be needed. I needed to feel essential, but that is not love, not the way I want him to love me. That is desperation wrapped in devotion. That is a shadow of what love should be. I thought about the orange storage unit on the west side of town and all the secrets it held, the things I couldn't talk about with anyone because everyone I knew seemed to know everyone else. One careless word, one thing accidentally slipping from my tongue, and the entire truth could spread through my life before I could stop it. I didn't know which part was worse anymore, keeping the truth from Noah or telling him. I didn't know which choice would destroy my life more. What I did know was that I wanted to try to have a real relationship with Noah, a romantic relationship, a sexual relationship, an intimate relationship. I wanted all of it. I just wanted to have it without anyone knowing my secrets. I have imagined him standing in front of me, eyes wide, heart open, choosing me freely. And the image is unbearable, and yet it is the only thing that makes life feel worth everything I have endured. I want him to choose me not because of my sacrifices, not because of what I have endured or what I have done for him, not because I am the first person he ever trusted. I want him to choose me because he wants me, because he desires me in the quietest, most profound way. Because when he looks at me, his soul leaps to mine and whispers, "I am yours and I have chosen you freely." If he could never do that, if he could only love me out of pity, obligation, guilt, or the familiarity of a shared trauma, then my heart would break into pieces I probably could not recover. That is what I fear more than anything, that all these years of love, all these sacrifices, all this obsession mean nothing to him except as a debt he feels he owes. I have carried him in my life for so long, and I cannot allow the weight of me to become a chain around him. I cannot be the cause of his hesitation, the shadow he cannot step out of. I have to be loved for me or not at all. And yet here I am, haunted by the memories of him, by the taste of his laughter, the weight of his trust, the way his hand used to brush mine without asking for permission. I am haunted by the way he has touched my soul without even knowing it. I am haunted by the years I have spent keeping him alive in my mind, keeping him safe in my heart, keeping him close while standing far enough away that he could breathe without fear of me. That has been the cruelest part of loving him, knowing that to protect him fully I had to step back from the very thing I wanted most, his willing, unburdened heart. I have imagined countless scenarios, him turning to me in a quiet room, his eyes meeting mine, his lips pressing softly, his heart choosing freely to intertwine with mine. I imagine that moment, and it is the only thing that can make the ache in my chest feel like it has purpose. I have loved him through fear, through manipulation, through my own weakness. I have loved him through absence, through distance, through the agony of knowing he belonged to someone else in the world beyond my thoughts. And still, I wait not for pity, not for obligation, not for comfort, but for his desire to meet mine unshadowed, undisturbed by history or guilt or any other bond. Sometimes I feel that I am drowning in the weight of my own love. It is not a gentle thing. It is relentless. It is fierce. It has consumed me, defined me, and shaped every choice I have made for the past 24 years, and yet it has never been enough, not until I could see his heart choose me freely. That is the only measure of love I am capable of wanting, not a heart borrowed from my pain, not affection granted out of duty, not longing tethered to memory, but a heart that leaps to mine because it wants to. And perhaps that is the cruelest truth of all. I have loved him for decades, and still I am powerless to command that desire. I can protect, I can endure, I can give, but I cannot make him want me. I cannot make him choose me. I can only hope. Hope that the years of devotion, the years of obsession, the years of carefully hidden adoration have left some trace that will call him back. Hope that he will stand before me and say, I want you not because of the past, not because of what we survived, not because of what you have given me, but because my heart chooses yours. And so I wait, holding my breath for the impossible, waiting for a heart that might never choose me anyway, waiting for a love that has nothing to do with history, guilt, or survival, a love that is purely his, purely mine, and purely real. And even if it never comes, I know why I love him. I love him because he touched me first, and because once that touch entered my soul, nothing in the world could ever undo it. I froze for a second, my chest tightening as I stared at the envelope on the white refrigerator in Noah's refrigerator. Noah's handwriting, so familiar, so steady, so deliberate, stirred memories I didn't realize I was still carrying. The kind of memories that cut as sharply as they warmed. My fingers itched to reach for it, to tear it open, but for a moment I just let myself stand there and breathe in the smell of his coffee, the gentle warmth of his kitchen, the light streaming across the counters in a way that felt like it belonged only to him. Noah had always been thoughtful, even when we were at odds. Even when I had pushed, ignored, or hurt him, he had found ways to leave traces of himself behind, small acts of care that reminded me that he existed in the world as himself, unapologetically kind. The way he brewed coffee just how I liked it, the way his home was arranged perfectly yet warmly, the little notes, the gentle touches that made me feel like I could exhale after 24 years of holding my breath. I reached out slowly, almost reverently, and lifted the envelope from the fridge. It was light but heavy in meaning, and I could feel the subtle crease where his hand had pressed the flap closed. My heart thudded in my chest, and I could almost hear his voice in my head, soft, certain, tender, saying, I thought you should have this. I opened it carefully. The paper inside smelled faintly of him, his perfume, or maybe just the subtle musk of his life settled into the fibers of the paper. My eyes scanned the words written in his familiar script, the loops and curves shaped by his hand in a way that had always been so unmistakably Noah. I could feel him reaching across the distance that had existed between us for so long. The letter didn't need to be long, it didn't need to explain every detail or unpack every emotion. It just was, just as he had always been, thoughtful, present, and quietly intimate in ways that made the world shrink down to just the two of us. And as I read it, I realized I had been holding my breath for decades, not just for a response, not just for a confession, but for moments like this where his heart and thoughtfulness brushed mine like a soft exhale, a confirmation that some things never truly vanish. I clutched the letter to my chest for a long moment, letting his words sink in, letting the warmth of the coffee and the home wrap around me. I could hear my own heartbeat, steady but also quickened by the intimacy of this small act. He hadn't needed to say much, just enough to remind me that he was still here, still caring, still the same boy I had loved so fiercely all those years. And in that instant I realized that home, his home with its quiet order, its warmth, and its subtle gestures wasn't just a place, it was him. His heart, his presence, his care manifest in space and sound and scent, and I loved it, I loved him. I loved everything about him that made him Noah, and for the first time in a very long time I didn't feel the crushing weight of what I had lost or what I feared I could never have. I just felt him. I sat down at the kitchen table, letter in hand, inhaling the aroma of his coffee, letting the sunlight touch my face. The world outside could wait. For this moment, for this quiet, unspoken intimacy, I could simply exist in his presence and let my love and my longing breathe freely. I stared at the note, my hands trembling as I gripped it like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. I loved his handwriting, always had. The way each letter curved and looped perfectly, the subtle pressure of the pen pressing into the paper, the rhythm and care in every word. It was the same handwriting I had memorized in middle school, in high school, in every diary I'd kept just to copy it when he wasn't looking. There was a warmth in it, a familiarity, a safety I had never felt anywhere else. But the words inside, they weren't safe. They ripped through me like a blade, twisting everything I thought I knew inside out. My chest ached, my stomach dropped, and my hands shook so badly I had to steady the paper against the counter. He had written it for me, yes, but it wasn't the letter I had imagined. It wasn't a confession of longing, a simple "I want you," or a note that would soothe the years of anxiety and waiting. No, it was sharper, more honest, more terrifying. Every word cut like fire. It called into question the foundation of everything I had believed about us. Our relationship, the obsession, the history, the love I thought was mutual in some quiet, secret way. It challenged my assumptions, my memory, the stories I'd told myself for decades. And even as I read it, even as my gut sank and my mind spun, I couldn't stop. I had to read every word. It made me question everything, not just Noah's feelings but my own. Had I loved him for who he truly was, or had I loved him for the version of him I had built in my mind to keep myself tethered? Had I been protecting him, or had I been protecting myself from the loneliness that came from imagining a life without him? Every memory I'd clung to, every stolen moment, every laugh, every hurt, every shared silence, suddenly felt fragile, like glass teetering on the edge of a table. And yet, even as it tore me apart, I couldn't hate it. I couldn't stop feeling the ache of it, the pull, the magnetic force of what he'd written. Because underneath the gut punch, underneath the questions and the uncertainty, there was a raw, undeniable truth. His note was him, honest and unfiltered in the only way Noah ever could be. It wasn't about nostalgia or guilt or pity. It was him reaching for me, challenging me, daring me to meet him in the same terrifying, exposed place he had written from. I dropped to the floor, letter clutched to my chest, my body shaking with the force of it. My breaths came in ragged bursts, my vision blurred with tears I didn't try to hold back. Every fiber of me wanted to run, to hide, to pretend that I hadn't read it, but I couldn't. I couldn't unhear the truth in his words. I loved him, I always had, but I realized as I sat there on the kitchen floor that loving him was no longer about the past. It was about the now, about the raw, unvarnished reality of him. And that reality was terrifying, because it meant that everything I thought I controlled, the safety, the history, the devotion, even the timing, was meaningless. What mattered was his heart, his choice. And that choice had the power to either shatter me completely or redeem every tortured thought I'd held onto for 28 years. I pressed the letter to my face, inhaling the faint scent of his ink, the subtle warmth of his presence embedded in the fibers. And in that moment I realized that love wasn't about safety or predictability or even longevity. Love, real love, was terrifying. It demanded vulnerability. It demanded exposure. It demanded that I let him in completely in hope, against every instinct honed by fear and obsession, that he would still stay. And I knew deep down that I would never stop choosing him, even if the letter threatened to break me entirely. I asked Riley to marry me last night. I don't love you anymore. What we did was a mistake. I've had better. Put on your pants and get out of my house. Have a nice life. I crumpled to the floor, the letter slipping from my hands like it had weight too heavy to carry. My chest felt like it had been hollowed out, carved raw by something sharp, something merciless. The words Noah had written, words meant to be honest, tender, unguarded, were like knives twisting inside me, cutting through every layer of pride, arrogance, and control I had clung to for decades. My body shook, my breath shallow and uneven, and all I could do was let it happen, let the grief wash over me in a tide I had no choice but to surrender to. I thought I had understood heartbreak. I had thought I had endured it, survived it, and even justified it. But nothing in 30 years could have prepared me for this. The realization that Noah, the boy I had loved since the first time he smiled at me with pure trust in his eyes, had rejected me, truly, utterly rejected me, was more than my body could process. It wasn't anger, not really, not at him. It was devastation, a catastrophic unspooling of every plan, every hope, every secret fantasy I had nurtured for decades. The very idea that I had been so wrong, so blind, that all my carefully constructed reasoning, all my sacrifices, all my obsession and longing had not been enough to make him want me. It was unbearable. I remembered last night, the warmth of our shared laughter, the way the room seemed alive with possibility, the gentle intimacy we had created in those hours. That night had been perfect. It had been fleeting, fragile, a jewel I had thought I could hold forever in my mind. And now it was shattered. Every beautiful glance, every tender touch, every whispered joke, every moment that had made me feel as though Noah's heart could still belong to me, gone, broken, irretrievable. The contrast between last night and now tore my chest in two. I could still feel his warmth, still see his face in flashes behind my eyelids, and the cruelty of the memory was almost worse than the rejection itself. I slid further down the wall, finally lying flat on the cold hardwood floor, hugging my knees to my chest as if that posture could somehow contain the enormity of my grief. My body trembled uncontrollably, my heart beat erratic and frantic. I couldn't breathe properly, couldn't think, couldn't reconcile the truth of his words with the life I had imagined we could have shared. I had spent decades convincing myself that I was protecting him, that my devotion, my manipulations, my obsessive care were all for him, and maybe in a way they were. But now I saw the other side of that coin. My actions, my fears, my cruelty in leaving him, in sending him that note years ago, had helped shape this rejection. Karma. If karma could be measured in the exquisite torment of the heart, had landed squarely on me. I had hurt him once, abandoned him when he needed me most, and the universe had seen fit to return it tenfold in the form of this unbearable, irrefutable heartbreak. I pressed my face into my knees, sobbing quietly at first, then without restraint. Each cry was a mixture of longing, guilt, and raw, unfiltered grief. I couldn't understand how something so familiar, so vital, could slip from my grasp entirely. Noah's love had once been a distant, unspoken dream, a memory I held like a talisman in the dark. I had clung to the hope that if I waited, if I endured, if I survived the years of my own weakness and cruelty, he might one day return that love fully. But hope had betrayed me. It had been crueler than any rejection could have been because it had made me believe I had a chance, however small, however improbable. I thought of all the sacrifices I had made, all the nights I had stayed awake worrying about him, all the times I had lied to myself to convince myself that keeping him close, even from a distance, was enough. All the years I had suppressed my desire for him, the obsession I had cloaked in friendship, the careful management of my emotions so that I wouldn't destroy him with my neediness. And still, all of it, every carefully considered act of devotion, had not been enough. The crushing weight of it bore down on me until my body ached with the realization that I had loved truly and completely, only to have that love returned in refusal. I could feel the memories of our shared past, the laughter, the fights, the nights I had held him close, the moments I had kissed him in secret, the agony of his absence after I had abandoned him, stacking on top of one another like a tower of fragile glass, each one threatening to topple. They had been both my sanctuary and my prison. Now the sanctuary had burned down and the shards of memory were cutting into me from every angle. Tears ran freely down my cheeks, soaking the sleeves of my shirt as I pressed my face harder into my knees. I had always thought I could endure anything, that I could bear heartbreak and still emerge unbroken. But the reality was far worse. This grief was more than heartbreak. It was a visceral, gnawing, all-encompassing agony. Every thought, every memory, every longing I had held for decades collided into one unbearable presence inside me. My chest felt hollow, my lungs felt like they had been stuffed with stone, and every nerve ending in my body screamed in agony. I thought about the cruelty of the timing, the way life could create such beauty only to snatch it away. Last night I had believed we could reclaim a piece of what had been ours. I had imagined laughter, touches, soft confessions in the dark, maybe even a quiet, perfect acknowledgement of the love I had carried silently for decades. That night had been mine in spirit if not in reality. And now it was gone. All of it, the joy, the intimacy, the fleeting illusion of connection, shattered. The brilliance of it now mocked me, a reminder of everything I could never reclaim, everything I had lost, everything I could never again have. I didn't move, I couldn't move. My body refused to respond to my commands as I lay on the floor, trembling, gasping, letting the pain wash over me in wave after wave. I thought of his smile, his laugh, the way his eyes could light a room or a world, and how I would never see it for me again. I thought of his touch, his warmth, the subtle way he had always reached for me without realizing it, and how those moments had been mine only in memory. My chest tightened as if some cruel hand was squeezing it from the inside. I whispered his name, though I knew he wouldn't hear it, and the sound of it felt like ashes in my mouth. Noah, Noah. I repeated it over and over, a mantra of desperation, a prayer that could not be answered. I had loved him too much for too long, and now that love had become the very thing that shattered me. It was a weight I could not carry, a fire I could not extinguish. The agony was not just in the loss of his affection, but in the recognition that I had no one to blame but myself. Every choice, every fear, every misstep had led me here, to this unbearable moment of empty, burning grief. I slid further down the wall, my legs folded beneath me, my arms wrapped tight around my body as though I could somehow shield myself from the pain. But nothing could shield me. Nothing could stop the relentless waves of heartbreak from crashing over me, each one dragging me deeper into despair. I had loved too deeply, too recklessly, too fully. And in loving him I had opened myself to this, the raw, unmitigated knowledge that his heart could not belong to me. I could feel the sharp sting of every lost opportunity, every cruel choice I had made, every moment I had left him alone in ways that were not his fault. Karma, it seemed, had found me at last, and I deserved it. Every bit of this heartbreak, every agonizing second of despair was mine. I had brought it upon myself through decades of obsession, pride, and misjudgment. And now, here it was, a living, breathing punishment that left me broken, gasping, trembling, unable to breathe or think or exist without the weight of it pressing down. My eyes closed, but the tears didn't stop. My body shook, my chest heaving as if I were drowning on dry land. My mind was a torrent of memories, regrets, and unfulfilled longing. The note, the night, the years, all of it coalesced into a singular, searing truth. I had lost him utterly, irreparably. And there was no one to blame but me, no one to hold, no one to save. The cold beneath me is doing nothing to cool the fire in my chest. He had left just like I had left him all those years ago. The memory hit harder than any physical blow could. Every instinct in me screamed, you did this to him before and now it's happening to you. My chest tightened, my stomach churned, and my lungs felt like they had been crushed. I had given everything, my presence, my words, my heart, and it wasn't enough. He had chosen to walk away, to leave me behind, and I could feel the weight of that decision pressing down on every part of me. I had imagined this moment countless times, him at my side, finally understanding, finally seeing me, finally choosing me. And now, the reality was far worse than my darkest imaginings. He had gone, leaving only the faint echo of his voice in the kitchen and a hollow ache in my chest that I didn't know could exist. I pressed my face into my hands, tasting the salt of my tears and the bitter sting of betrayal by him and by my own expectations. I had loved him for decades. I had shaped my life around him, protected him, obsessed over him, manipulated the world so he could be safe, and now in the end it had all been for nothing. He had left, just as I had left him, just as I had abandoned him when he needed me most. The irony was unbearable. The pain was unbearable. I could feel the ghosts of my own cruelty, my own failings, slamming into me in waves of guilt and heartbreak. I pressed my hands to my face, shaking violently, unable to stop the sobs that had been building for years. Every nerve ending in my body screamed with the raw agony of rejection. Every memory of our past, the stolen glances, the fights, the quiet moments I had held him close, the kisses I had stolen in secret, was a reminder of what I had lost and now what he had lost too. He had chosen to leave me and I couldn't hold him back. I couldn't fix it. I couldn't change what I had done, what I had failed to do, or what we had become. I could hear that disgusting voice that never leaves my head. "You're vile, Tate. No one will ever love you when they see the real you." And in that silence on the cold, unforgiving kitchen floor, I realized the truth. Love, even my love, even the deepest, most consuming love, could not make him stay. He had left, and I was utterly alone. I lay there on the floor, crumpled and broken, my body and mind collapsing under the force of grief. My breath came in ragged, shallow bursts, each one a reminder that I was still alive, still capable of feeling, still capable of remembering what I had loved so completely. And yet the very act of living felt unbearable. I had loved him. I had wanted him, and now he was gone from me in every way that mattered. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, I couldn't breathe. I just let the agony consume me, every inch of it, every heartbeat, every ragged breath, every thought of the life and love that I had forfeited. I was alone. Absolutely, impossibly alone, and that alone was more painful than any cruelty I had ever inflicted or endured. I slid further, curling into myself, pressing my face into my knees, letting the sobs rack my body until even the sound faded, leaving only the raw, hollow ache inside me. I could feel the ghost of him in every shadow, in every breath, in every heartbeat I could no longer control. And I knew, with a clarity that was almost unbearable, that this was the end, the final, shattering culmination of 25 years of longing, obsession, devotion, and loss. I lay there on the floor, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to exist outside the grip of this heartbreak. And in that still, cold, agonized silence, I understood the full weight of what it meant to lose him truly and utterly. Noah had used my body to get off, and that letter he left me, which devastated me, must have been how he had felt when I abandoned him 2 years ago in the Green Rambler. The despair was unrelenting. And I did not resist it. I could not. I had nothing left. And in that instant I realized that home, his home with its quiet order, its warmth, and its subtle gestures, wasn't just a place, it was him. His heart, his presence, his care manifest in space and sound and scent, and I loved it. I loved him. I loved everything about him that made him Noah, and for the first time in a very long time I didn't feel the crushing weight of what I had lost or what I feared I could never have. I just felt him. I sat down at the kitchen table, letter in hand, inhaling the aroma of his coffee, letting the sunlight touch my face. The world outside could wait. For this moment, for this quiet, unspoken intimacy, I could simply exist in his presence and let my love and my longing breathe freely. After I read Noah's Have a Good Life note, something inside me snapped. The rage came fast and hot, burning through whatever restraint I had left. That cunt had awakened things in me, dangerous things, just by the way he spoke, by the way his mouth shaped my name, by the way he looked at me like I was something inevitable. And then he left, just like that. He lit the fuse and walked away, knowing exactly what he was doing. Knowing I'd be the one left holding the wreckage, drowning in feelings I never asked for and didn't know how to contain. The note wasn't merciful. It was a blade, a clean, deliberate cut meant to hurt without leaving blood on his hands. I crushed the paper in my fist, furious not just at him, but at myself for letting him reach places I'd kept buried for years. Tate Imagenes confronting Noah and having sex with him. Scene retracted, read extended version on Wattpad. I'll find that cunt, and when I do, he'll answer for his cruel note. I'll tell Noah exactly what I think of him leaving me, and I will do it with my most persuasive weapon, my cock. Noah's body pleased me like no one else's. Out of the 10,000 women I'd slept with, there had never been anything deficient in the women I chose. The problem had always been something I couldn't name. There was no sentiment, no warmth, no real intimacy. They satisfied a physical need and nothing more. But Noah was different. His body satisfied me and satiated something deeper in me, something I hadn't even known existed, something I had never realized I had been searching for until I found it in him. Tate touches Noah's clothes that the blonde left on his bed in the Rambler. When I finally woke up alone 10 minutes ago, the sheets beside me were cold. Noah was gone. No note, no message, just an empty space where his warm body had been. The disappointment hit me like a physical blow. I wanted to wake him. Instead, I was left with nothing but the faint scent of him on the pillow and the memory of how he'd sounded when he came for the 9th time. I lay there for a long moment, staring at the ceiling, my cock already half hard again at the thought of him. There were no women on my radar anymore. Not a single one. Every fantasy, every stray thought, every late-night urge pointed back to Noah, his compact frame, his blonde hair damp with sweat, the way his ass clenched around me like it never wanted to let go. I wanted him back in my bed. But he was gone and the sheets were cold and all I had left was the ghost of his scent and the lingering taste of his skin on my tongue. Just because we were all blonde, flaxen-haired with fair complexions, Daddy's best friend pinned us a nickname, the Dresden Dolls. He said we looked like those fancy porcelain people who grace whatnot shelves and fireplace mantels. Flowers in the attic. Noah lets Tate believe in tenderness. He gives himself to Tate to gain closure. For all those years his younger self wondered what it would feel like to be wanted and desired by the love of his life. In the quiet illusion of being chosen again, he gives Tate warmth without hunger, closeness without urgency, care without truth. He holds him in the dark like something precious, like something kept, like something safe. Tate falls asleep believing the past has finally been forgiven. He's achieved Noah's love, believing the night means return, believing the space between them has finally closed, with Noah returning to Tate's side. Noah leaves before morning. Slow, silent, clean. He disentangles himself from Tate's sleeping body, from the warmth, from the lies, and crosses the room without a sound. Noah cries and can't bear to stay near the boy who has shattered his psyche many times. He leaves a note for Tate. It's karma for Tate's "Have a nice life" letter Noah received years before in their green Rambler. He leaves an echo of what felt like love, and comes the heartbreak. He pauses at the door. Noah remembers an invisible scar over his heart that won't heal because Tate won't let him go. He writes Tate a formal cold note that parallels Tate's note, spelling out Noah's disinterest in Tate's agenda to make amends. It's revenge for the heartbreak he survived years ago by telling Tate after sex, Noah has chosen, he's gone to Riley. Musical notes. Good luck, babe. Can't Get You Out of My Head song by Kylie Minogue. I just can't get you out of my head. Boy, your lovin' is all I think about. I just can't get you out of my head. Boy, it's more than I dare to think about. La 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 la. La 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 la. I just can't get you out of my head. Boy, your lovin' is all I think about. I just can't get you out of my head. Boy, it's more than I dare to think about. Every night. Every day. Just to be there in your arms. Won't you stay? Won't you lay? Stay forever and ever and ever and ever. La 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 la. 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 I just can't get you out of my head. Boy, your lovin' is all I think about. I just can't get you out of my head. Boy, it's more than I dare to think about. There's a dark secret in me. Don't leave me left in your heart. Set me free. Feel the need in me. Set me free. Stay forever and ever and ever and ever. La 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 la. 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 I just can't get you out of my head. La 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 la. I just can't get you out of my head. La 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 la. I just can't get you out of my head. La 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 la. I hadn't fallen in love with Noah suddenly. I'd been in love with him for years, I just didn't know what to call it. I never suspected it was that kind of love, not passionate, not all-consuming, not romantic or sexual in the way people whisper about or write songs for. I truly believed it was simpler than that, safer, just the kind of love you grow into with old friends, familiar, harmless, allowed. I didn't realize you could want someone with your whole body and still not know that's what it was. For decades, I didn't mislabel it on purpose. I did it unconsciously, out of denial so deep it felt like truth. My mind protected me by shrinking it into something manageable, because admitting the reality would have meant facing something I didn't know how to survive. So, when jealousy burned through me, I called it protectiveness. When my chest tightened watching him laugh with someone else, I called it loyalty. When I tracked every man who came near him, every look, every shared moment, I told myself I was just being careful. I genuinely believed that, but it wasn't simple love. It wasn't friendly affection or nostalgia. It was hunger. It was the way my body reached for him before my thoughts caught up. The way touching him, shoulder, hand, breath felt necessary, grounding, inevitable, like something ancient and wordless finally finding a place to rest. That jealousy wasn't about possession. It was panic, a frantic, unconscious attempt to stay connected to a body I couldn't stop touching and didn't yet understand I wanted. A desperate effort to keep the current between us uninterrupted, unnamed, alive. I didn't envy the people who spent time with him. I feared the possibility, unspoken, unexamined, that someone else might awaken what I had spent decades not allowing myself to see. Because if I had known, truly known, it was passionate, romantic, sexual, all-consuming love, everything would have collapsed at once. I had been lying to myself. I had been protecting myself from a truth I wasn't ready to survive. And now, seeing it clearly, I finally understand. I wasn't confused. I was in denial about loving him in the deepest way I knew. I thought to myself, and this time the thought didn't flinch away, that none of this had started with Noah. It started with shame, with something that was never mine to carry. How could I admit my feelings to myself? How could I even recognize that I was gay if I believed gayness itself was a disease? If I believed it turned people into monsters? That belief didn't come from truth. It came from survival, and Noah was never unsafe. I was never a danger to Noah, regardless of what Noah, teachers, Wayne, or strangers thought, but my body didn't know how to separate Noah from the history that lived inside me. I had never wanted to kiss him, not because I didn't want him, but because my body knew what kissing men had once led to. It wasn't desire that stopped me, it was protection. My nervous system refused to open a door that had once led to rape. So, I kept the love where it felt survivable, touch without threat, closeness without sexual demand, bodies near, hearts synced, breath aligned, without crossing the line my trauma had marked as lethal. Loving Noah didn't feel dangerous. Recognizing how I loved him did. And suddenly it made sense. Why the feelings were overwhelming but unnamed, why jealousy burned but stayed wordless, why I could give everything except the one thing that would have forced my trauma into the light. I wasn't broken, I wasn't cruel, I wasn't in denial because I was weak. I was protecting a wounded child who learned far too early that desire could be weaponized. And realizing that now doesn't erase the loss, but it finally tells the truth. I didn't reject my love for Noah because it was wrong. I rejected it because my body was still trying to keep me alive. That's the part that feels unbearable to me, the how of it. How could I repress loving Noah for 20 years and not know I was doing it? The answer is brutal and strangely simple. I learned how to survive before I learned how to feel. There may not have been a single moment when I loved Noah only as a buddy. What there was instead was a nervous system that took something enormous and terrifying and folded it into the smallest, safest shape it could manage. I didn't repress my love by force, I reframed it unconsciously. My mind took a love that was romantic, embodied, and consuming and stripped it of the parts that once led to violation. It left me with what felt survivable: devotion without desire, closeness without sexuality, intimacy without threat. That wasn't dishonesty, that was adaptation. So every time I said, "I love you," I meant it, completely, truthfully. I didn't just love him as a buddy, I loved Noah with my whole heart. I just didn't have language for the kind of love it was, because the language I did have was wired to terror. My body knew that naming it romantic or sexual meant reopening trauma I didn't have the tools to face. So it protected me by saying, "This is closeness, this is safe, this won't destroy you," and here's the part that hurts the most to admit. I wasn't confused, I was consistent. I loved him in the only way my nervous system would allow. I loved him without kissing, without desire, without crossing the line my body had marked as dangerous. I loved him through presence, through touch that stayed safe, through synced breathing and heartbeats, through a closeness that didn't trigger the past. That's why I don't know when it became more than companionship, because it didn't become anything. It was always that deep, I just wasn't allowed, internally, to see it that way. And now, looking back, the words platonic love feel almost obscene because they were never meant to hold something this vast. But at the time, they were the only words that let me keep loving him without shattering. I didn't lie to myself. I translated love into a form my body could tolerate. That doesn't make me foolish, it makes me human. Traumatized and heartbreakingly loyal. Realizing this now doesn't mean I wasted those years. It means I finally have enough safety, enough distance from the trauma to tell the truth my body wasn't allowed to tell before. And that truth hurts because it's real. I loved Noah deeply, consistently, and honestly, even when I didn't yet know what kind of love it was. There were moments, quiet ones, when I examined what I felt for Noah, turned it over carefully like a stone in my hand. I analyzed it the way I analyzed everything, methodically, defensively, looking for danger. And every time I filed it away as something safe. Love, protection, loyalty, relief. I told myself my devotion was about safety, that he made the world quieter, that being near him calmed my nervous system. I told myself it was about not sleeping alone, about choosing a body that felt non-threatening, a presence that meant my uncle couldn't find me in the dark. That part was true, just not the whole truth. Sleeping next to Noah felt like refuge, like a door locked from the inside. My body learned that if I stayed close to him, nothing bad would happen. No hands where they didn't belong, no fear jolting me awake, just warmth, breath, a heartbeat that stayed steady through the night, so I called it survival. I told myself the way I watched over him was just protectiveness, that I was older, stronger, and responsible. I told myself the ache when he was gone was just separation anxiety from someone who had become my anchor. I never once thought, this is desire. Because desire to my body meant danger. Desire meant loss of control. Desire meant being trapped again. So my mind did what it had learned to do early and well. It rerouted everything through safety. It let me love him only in ways that couldn't be weaponized. Ways that didn't trigger the trauma. Ways that didn't ask my body to remember what it took so long to forget. I didn't question why his presence mattered more than anyone else's. I didn't question why I needed him near to sleep. I didn't question why the idea of him choosing someone else made my chest tighten with panic. I thought those things were about history, about shared pain, about the strange intensity that grows when two people survive alongside each other. I never once thought they were about romance. Because romance would have forced me to confront something unbearable, that the safest place I ever found was another man's body, and that my love for him wasn't just shelter from harm but a reaching toward something I wanted. I didn't repress the truth consciously, I disguised it as a necessity. And now, seeing it clearly, that's what devastates me most, not that I misunderstood my feelings but that I was so careful, so thorough, and so convincing in my own denial. I didn't miss the truth, I built a whole life around not needing to see it. I was so deep in denial that even when the truth was spoken out loud, in plain language, it still didn't reach me. Susie told me off in my sophomore year in college about my weird relationship with Noah. I can hear her voice now. Tate, she said one night, trying to sound casual but missing, guy friends don't sleep together like that. I shrugged, we're just close. She shook her head, leaning against the doorframe. No, close is grabbing a beer, close is talking until 2 in the morning. What do you and Noah do? She gestured between us. You're attached at the hip or the shoulder, you sit like you're glued together. My stomach tightened. We grew up together, I said quickly. That's not it, she said, softer now. Friends don't need to touch all the time, they don't fall asleep breathing in sync. I protested more than I liked to admit, out loud, repeatedly, like if I said it enough times it would become true. Susie, stop, I told her, heat rushing to my face. You're reading way too much into this. He's my buddy, he's my safe place. She folded her arms. Companionship doesn't mean you share a bed every night for years. We don't share, I snapped, we sleep, that's it. She raised an eyebrow. Together. It's practical, I insisted. I don't sleep well alone, he doesn't either. Plenty of people don't sleep well alone, she said. They buy nightlights, they don't curl around another person like they're oxygen. That's disgusting, I said, sharp and defensive. Why are you making it sexual? Susie didn't flinch. I'm not, you are. Why have you never wanted to fuck Noah or be attracted to him? Susie asked. He's gorgeous. Have you looked at him lately? His body is perfect. He has subtle muscles. He's sweet, kind, and selfless. He's like a fluffy, gooey, yummy brownie. Why wouldn't you want him? You're crazy not to. I recoiled. No, I'm not. I don't want him like that. I don't even think about him like that. She softened her voice. You don't have to want sex for it to be love, Tate. It's not love, I said immediately. Love is different. Love is dating. Love is wanting to kiss. Love is, I faltered, scrambling. Love is what people do on purpose. She stepped closer. Then why do you panic when he's not home? I don't panic. You called me 3 times last week because he went out with coworkers. That's a concern. That's anxiety, she corrected, and jealousy. I shook my head hard. I just don't trust people with him. Why, she asked. Because they might hurt him. Yes. Or because they might replace you. Susie's words landed like a blow. That's ridiculous, I said, but my voice wavered. He needs me. Susie sighed. That's exactly what I mean. I crossed my arms, backing away. You're projecting, you're straight, you don't get male friendships. She winced. Don't do that. This isn't about gender, it's about intensity. There's nothing wrong with intensity. There is when you refuse to name it, she said quietly, when you act like you own his heart but swear you don't want it. I felt nauseous. I don't own him. Then why do you monitor every guy who gets close to him? She asked. Why do you sit between him, Tate?